Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. If you would like to become a patron of the podcast, just pop along to patreon.com/the History Network and find out about the benefits of becoming a patron there. Thank you so much to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, Season 29, Episode 10, After Cannae. This episode was written by Mark DeSantis. Mark DeSantis is an Ancient Warfare podcast regular and author of Rome Seizes the Trident and the science fiction series The Memnon War. Thanks, Mark, for writing this script for us. At the Battle of Cannae, 2nd of August 216 BC, Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca administered one of Rome's most crushing military defeats. Depending upon the ancient source, Roman losses on the Apulian battlefield numbered anywhere from roughly 50,000, as Livy relates, to around 70,000, as Polybius insists. Hannibal had enacted a double envelopment of the Roman army, a manoeuvre widely considered to be a tactical masterpiece that is to this day studied in war colleges around the world. The headstrong Roman consul Gaius Terentius Varro plundered straight into a cunning trap set for him by the brilliant enemy commander. Surrounded, the Romans were slaughtered by a numerically inferior opponent, with few escaping the encirclement. This was not the only crushing defeat suffered by the Romans at the outset of the Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC. At the Trebia River in 218 BC and at Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, the Romans suffered heavily in their losing battles with Hannibal's small but extremely well-trained army. Few nations could have survived even one such lopsided encounter. The Romans had now lost 3 major battles in the space of 2 years to Hannibal, who was free to ransack the Italian peninsula. Between 218 and 216 BC, Rome and her allies had lost at least 100,000 soldiers, a significant portion of Italy's military-age men. Catastrophic defeat was bound to test the resolve of any people, and it brought out some of the uglier aspects of human nature in the Romans. Yet, overall, the reaction of the Senate and people to adversity in the aftermath of Cannae brought the extraordinary Roman attributes of fortitude and perseverance to the fore. The Romans absorbed their losses and hung on to achieve victory after a long struggle that lasted 17 years and embraced far-flung battlefields in Italy, Sicily, Spain, the Balkans, Sardinia, and Africa. One of Rome's finest traits was a stubborn, even mulish unwillingness to admit defeat. About 10,000 of their soldiers that had survived Cannae found refuge at the Apulian town of Canusium. One of these men was Publius Cornelius Scipio the Younger, who would later go on to command Roman forces in Spain and then in Africa, where he defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. In 216 BC, however, he was still a very young man, all of 20 years old, in a town full of legionaries reeling from the calamity at Cannae. He was given command along with Appius Claudius Pulcher of the survivors. His first move was to quash any thought of giving up. The defeat had been so shattering that no less than the son of a former consul, Publius Furius Philus, insisted that the Republic was dead. Some Romans, such as Lucius Caecilius Metellus, were thinking of taking to the sea and seeking refuge with one of the Greek kings to the east. In the shocked and benumbed atmosphere of the camp, they determined to hold a meeting to discuss what to do. Such defeatist talk was almost as dangerous as Hannibal's victorious army, and Scipio acted decisively to end it. For him there was nothing to discuss, and he would not abide talk of giving up. Those who were still willing to fight, he told them to take up their arms and come with him. He led his group of followers to the tent of Metellus, where he and several other young noblemen who had given thought to fleeing Italy were gathered to talk about their plan to go east. Scipio held aloft his unsheathed sword in the presence of the other nobles and swore that he would never allow himself or any other Roman to abandon the Republic. He compelled those present to swear the same oath as he did, warning that his own sword was drawn against anyone who failed to follow his example. The force of Scipio's words and the rapidity and determination with which he acted overwhelmed the other men, and they immediately made the same oath and accepted Scipio's leadership. In the city of Rome, uncertain news of the outcome of Cannae had by now arrived. The lamentations of women who mourned for their menfolk, their fates still unknown, was incessant. Quintus Fabius Maximus moved the Senate to act to suppress any panic, with the senators themselves dispatched to tamp down any unrest in the city. The women were ordered to remain indoors and forbidden to gather in public. Family mourning was strictly circumscribed. City-wide silence was decreed, and guards were placed at every gate to stop anyone from leaving Rome. When word arrived directly from the surviving consul, Gaius Terentius Varro, at Canusium, of the true scale of the loss, including the death of his co-consul, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, the Roman people were devastated. Every year Rome held religious rites in honour of Ceres, but because every married woman in the city had been personally struck by the heavy loss of life at Cannae, these rites had to be suspended because those in mourning were forbidden to take part in such ceremonies. The Romans were normally very attentive to the observance of religious rituals, and to prevent the abandonment of similar rites in the future, the Senate set a limit of 30 days on mourning in the city. In the panicky and frightened atmosphere of Rome, reasons for the cataclysm in Apulia had to be found. This unfortunate tendency in human communities to try to affix blame when bad events transpire was readily apparent. 2 Vestal virgins were said to have failed to remain virgins, and their sacrilege threatened Rome, though perhaps poor generalship on the part of the Roman commander at Cannae, Terentius Varro, had more to do with the loss there than the Vestal's diminished virtue. 1 Vestal was buried alive close to the Porta Collina, while the other took her own life. The man who had been intimate with one of these Vestals was flogged so viciously that he himself died. Roman religious sensibilities saw the anger of the gods at work in the defeat. Accordingly, they sent an embassy to the holy site of Delphi to ask the oracle what other measures they should take to appease the gods and avoid future misfortunes. The most ghastly action taken came after the Romans had consulted their Sibylline books, a sacred and ancient text that had been part of Rome's religious life for centuries. A Greek man and woman, together with a Gaulish man and woman, were sacrificed in the Forum Boreum by being buried alive. The ordinary, deeply patriotic Livy shows his disgust and embarrassment with this episode, calling it outlandish and un-Roman. Such was the profound state of despair and psychological shock that the Roman people were conducting even grisly human sacrifices to make peace with the wrathful gods. Some Romans were clearly unhinged by Cannae, but others displayed admirable grit, in particular the members of the Senate. Hannibal had discharged without ransom prisoners he had taken from amongst Rome's Italian allies. He now made to offer to the Roman soldiers whom he had captured on the battlefield at Cannae to arrange to ransom themselves from captivity. The prices were set at 500 quadrigati. A quadrigatus was a silver coin minted by Rome prior to the introduction of the famed silver denarius. For a cavalryman, 300 for a legionary foot soldier, and 100 for a slave. Hannibal allowed 10 of these Romans to go to Rome to confer with the Senate for their release, upon them swearing an oath that they would return to Hannibal. One of them slyly went back into Hannibal's camp just before he had left it, on the pretext of retrieving something he had forgotten inside it, just so that he could discharge his oath. He then hurried back to rejoin the other 9 departing men. With them went a Carthaginian noble named Carthalo to sound out the Romans about peace negotiations. The delegates arrived in Rome and appeared before the Senate. They had been surrounded and without water when they gave themselves up to Hannibal. They pleaded. Rome had a history of ransoming captives, including the release of the city from the Gauls in 390 BC, and of prisoners taken by the Tarentines in the early 3rd century BC. The survivors of Cannae, who had fought hard and well, should be no different. The prisoners had stayed on the battlefield, while others more fortunate had been able to run faster and escape without their weapons to either Canusium or to Venusia, another town in which Roman survivors of Cannae had found refuge. If ransomed, they would be excellent soldiers to defend the Republic. Rome's current manpower shortage was dire enough that the Senate had recently recruited 8,000 young volunteers, volones, from among the slaves in the city to fight in the legions. Surely native Roman soldiers, if ransomed, would be a better alternative to arming slaves. This plea was made in public before the assembled comitium of the Roman people. Knowing that many of their sons were in Carthaginian hands, many cried out to the senators to pay the ransom and bring their sons home to them. The Senate ordered out all others and began to debate the matter. Some senators were willing to pay the ransom, others would allow it only if no public funds were used to do so. But one senator, noted for his old-fashioned, iron-hard severity, Titus Manlius Torquatus, rose and spoke critically of the prisoners seeking ransom for themselves. They had the opportunity to flee to safety during the night when the Carthaginian army had retired for the evening, he said. Instead, they had given themselves up to Hannibal. They had a better example before them. The military tribune Publius Sempronius Tuditanus had been with them through the night after the battle. He had urged them not to surrender to Hannibal, but instead to fight their way out to friendly lines during the night. Just 600 Romans had chosen to follow him, while the majority remained behind. These 600, Torquatus pointed out, had made good their escape. This small force had found shelter in Canusium, along with other survivors. They had encountered no opposition as they departed. Should not the 7,000 others have been able to fight their way through too? The prisoners, now pleading for their ransom, had neither defended their camp nor tried to battle their way out of it. They were not deserving of redemption. Many of the senators had relations of their own among the prisoners, and would otherwise have wanted them restored, but above all they were worried about the precedent that they might set if they ransomed the men from Hannibal, as well as the benefit that would accrue to him if they paid so much money for the release of their captives. Rome was already short of cash because she had purchased the 8,000 slaves from their masters for military service. Hannibal was believed to be himself low on funds, and the senators did not want to alleviate his distress in this regard in any way. The request of the 10 delegates for ransom was icily denied. The refusal caused a new round of lamentation among the common people who wished to have their sons back, but the Senate would not budge. When the delegate who had surreptitiously discharged his oath to Hannibal upon leaving the Carthaginian camp made his way back to his home in Rome, the Senate had him arrested and returned to Hannibal under escort. Rome would not countenance the ransoming of men she deemed unworthy. It took much steel to be able to turn aside the pleas of men who were someone's sons, brothers, or fathers. The logic of the Senate's decision is clear. It was the duty of a Roman to fight to the end and do everything in his power to either defeat the enemy or die trying, or at least honourably escape to fight another day. The men who had surrendered to Hannibal had done none of those things. Their treatment would act as a warning to other Roman soldiers who might be tempted to do less than their utmost at some future date, with the prospect of a restoration to freedom by public largesse. In addition to inducting former slaves into the army, Rome lowered the minimum age qualification to 17 to make up her battle losses. In the resulting muster, Rome was able to put 4 complete legions and 1,000 cavalry into the field. Her allies were made to live up to their treaty obligations and send their own men to defend Rome. To arm these draftees, new weapons and armour were produced, and weapons taken from enemies in the battles of yesteryear, earlier dedicated to temples within the city, but now lying unused, were removed and distributed also. Another expedient was the release of 6,000 criminals and debtors in exchange for their military service. These men were equipped with the leftover weapons that had been carried through Rome during the triumph of Gaius Flaminius for his victory over the Gauls in 223 BC. Though these were not experienced soldiers by any means, and scarcely a replacement for the army lost at Cannae, there was now the semblance of an army ready to defend the city against Hannibal. One of the most far-reaching effects of the Cannae battle was the reorientation of Roman strategy. In 217 BC, in the wake of the defeats at the Trebia River and at Lake Trasimene, Rome had appointed as director the level-headed Quintus Fabius Maximus. Fabius understood that the Roman army, as it was presently constituted and led, could not defeat the brilliant Hannibal and his professionalized army. Instead, he chose to bleed Hannibal through smaller engagements while refusing to take part in a pitched battle that would almost certainly end in a Roman defeat. But few of the Romans of this period saw the merit in avoiding Hannibal as he burned and pillaged the Italian countryside, thinking that the Carthaginian could only be defeated in a great engagement. When Fabius's dictatorship expired, the party seeking an immediate confrontation with Hannibal, with the newly elected consul Terentius Varro as their champion, took control of the war. The unprecedented muster of 8 legions for the campaigning season of 216 BC was in keeping with their wish to forge the biggest sledgehammer they could to smash Hannibal once and for all. The abandonment of Fabius's policy of containment of Hannibal was a total failure, as borne out by the result of Cannae. The Romans wisely adopted Fabius's cautious strategy after Cannae, and from 216 BC to 203 BC, when Hannibal was recalled to Africa to deal with Scipio's army there, the Romans did not fight a major battle against him in Italy. There were further misfortunes ahead for Rome. Many allied peoples, such as the Samnites, Lucanians, the Cisalpine Gauls, and a number of Greek cities in the south, defected to Hannibal. This was understandable, as Rome had only recently become their overlord after years of bitter warfare, and Hannibal, for the time being at least, seemed to promise them freedom. The wealthy city of Capua in Campania, seeing the distress of the Romans in 216 BC, grew contemptuous of them and made an alliance with Hannibal. The demonstrated military superiority of Carthage also encouraged Philip V of Macedonia to seek an alliance with Hannibal against Rome to eject the Romans from the Balkans and raid Italian coasts. By the close of 216 BC, the Romans had lost the far north of Italy. They had lost much of the south. There was a new enemy across the Adriatic, desirous of plundering the peninsula, and Hannibal was at large and undefeated. Yet the Romans did not consider giving up the struggle against Carthage. When Carthello was discovered to be approaching Rome to sound out the Romans about peace talks, he was politely told to be gone from Roman territory by nightfall. A few, such as Furius Philus, might think that Rome was finished, but others, such as Scipio and the men who chose to follow him into the tent of Metellus after Cannae, thought otherwise. There were genuinely horrific moments when Roman religious paranoia caused some of them to engage in macabre human sacrifices to assuage the perceived anger of the gods. But overall, Roman resolve was strong, and nowhere more than in the Senate, where the sentimental desires of some to ransom Hannibal's captives were overcome by the more profound needs of the Republic to set a proper example for its soldiers and not give any unnecessary advantage to the enemy. By standing firm in the face of grievous losses, grimly raising replacement legions, or refusing even to consider peace, Rome was able to regain its footing, and the period of crisis passed. Many other ancient states might have disintegrated after receiving a single drubbing like the ones meted out by Hannibal at the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, or Cannae, yet Rome endured all three. Roman solidarity was such that when Gaius Terentius Varro, whom Livy holds as most responsible for the fiasco at Cannae, returned to Rome that same year, people came out to greet him and thanked him for not having given up on the Republic. Well, thank you, Mark, once again for writing that script for us. If you would like to write a script for us, just drop us a line, info@thehistorynetwork.org. And if you would like to become a patron, you can go along to patreon.com/thehistorynetwork to find out about becoming a patron there. We do once again thank all our patrons for making this podcast possible. Well, that's the last episode in season 29, so we will have a short break and then we will be back with season 30. So we look forward to welcoming you back then. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast, written by Mark DeSantis, read by Nick Barker.